Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in Trump versus Casas. So let's get into it. This is a really big one. I'm going to take a lot of time here, so bear with me. The case centered on President Trump's executive order 14160, which sought to end birthright citizenship for children born in the United States to undocumented immigrants or temporary visa holders. Lower courts had issued nationwide injunctions blocking the order. However, the Supreme Court's majority opinion, authored by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, held that such broad injunctions exceed the equitable authority granted to federal courts under the Judiciary Act of 1789. All right, now let's look up what is the Judiciary Act of 1789. It is a foundational law passed by the very first U.S. Congress that created the federal court system. It established how the judiciary branch would operate under the U.S. Constitution. Pretty big, right? All right, it gets better. So when you're studying limits class, you have to learn about this landmark case called Marbury v. Madison. It happened in 1803, where the Supreme Court struck down part of the Judiciary Act as unconstitutional and established the power of judicial review, meaning the court can declare laws unconstitutional. However, that's not all Marbury v. Madison was. Marbury v. Madison also made it clear that courts only have the right to have judicial review over a plaintiff's injury if they have jurisdiction over that injury. So, meaning, I'm speaking in law terms here. So an injury means I, as the plaintiff, meaning the person who is, let's say, suing Florida for whatever, I have an injury because Florida's government is affecting me, the plaintiff. So I go to the district court. However, the district court can only see my injury if they have jurisdiction over it. So they can only remedy my injury if they have jurisdiction over it. That was what made the biggest case with Marbury v. Madison, because Marbury had a justified injury, but there was no actual jurisdiction, so they didn't win the case. So the reason why that is important is because the class action lawsuits is district courts saying that they are allowed to do a universal nationwide lawsuit, meaning they're saying the entire country is injured and they have the right to remedy the injury. However, district courts are literally in the name, district court. They only have jurisdiction over their district. So they cannot do a class action lawsuit or a nationwide injunction, better said, which is a block for the entire country when they don't have jurisdiction over the entire country. And that's why it was a 6-3 ruling, which is really basic. It should have been a 9-0 ruling, but we have a lot of retards in the executive, not in the executive, in the Supreme Court, a lot of them. I'm allowed to say retards, so, all right. CASA refers to, formerly known as Casa de Maryland, established in 1985 as a Central American Solidarity Association of Maryland. CASA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting Latino and immigrant communities through legal services, education, employment assistance, and advocacy. The organization argued that the order violated the 14th Amendment and the National Act of 1940. The Supreme Court's decision in this case focused on the scope of nationwide injunctions rather than the constitutionality of executive order itself. All right. So in this ruling, they did not rule on birthright citizenship. I want to be very clear about that because people are saying they did, and that is not true. They have not. They focus on the nationwide injunctions. That is what the, I guess I would say the lawyer of the government, which is the administration, he was literally starting with nationwide injunctions because if you can get the Supreme Court to rule that the district court cannot do nationwide injunctions, then essentially when and if they rule on birthright citizenship, if they rule in their favor, which I predict they will, the district courts cannot do a class action lawsuit against the ruling. They have to do an individual lawsuit against the ruling. So it has to go by individual basis, which is what it's supposed to be. If anybody goes back to Marbury v. Madison, they specifically say that anything that has to do with the executive branch has to do with the country, not the individual. So if the individual is injured by whatever the executive branch does, the individual has a right to go to the court and get a remedy. But that does not mean that the courts will have jurisdiction to remedy. All right? Very clear. Now, let's look up what nationwide injunction means. Universal injunction, also called a nationwide injunction, is when a federal judge issues a court order that blocks a law, policy, or action, not just for the people involved in the lawsuit, but for everyone in the entire country. And they obviously made an obvious ruling that should have been a 9-0, that district courts don't have jurisdiction over the entire country because they're a district court. They only have jurisdiction over their district.